I said I'm
We know already introduced himself.
Yeah, so that's my latest novel from last year, and yeah, generally I sold over 100 short stories all over the world, like Romania, Poland, Hungary, Denmark, England, Canada, US, and won 24 awards for my stories.
Wow.
So that's in a nutshell. Thank you for asking.
I'm glad I asked.
So when you started writing and you got your first feedback, where and when, and how did you receive it? How did you?
So, my first, I have to be dead honest here, right? So my first feedback, really smart way to go get feedback was from my spouse. And boy, was he brutal. I mean, this was not like this, oh, that's my sweetheart, I'm going to say nice things about her manuscript, blah, blah, blah. He was brutal. And my reaction was so gracious. I kind of went, and said things that can't be repeated here because I don't know if it's going to be recorded or not. And then what I thought about it, I thought, was he really that brutal? Because what he said was true. And what he said shaped two characters in my first novel that became fan favorites. So it was really interesting. So that was the very first, before I go on to beta readers, I've got to say my husband was the first one. And yeah, and I think he feels slightly proud about himself.
Oh, feedback. I was fortunate that as a young one, my parents always gave strong feedback around things like grammar and making sure ideas were coherent. And through high school, so it wasn't necessarily creative writing or academic writing that was going to be published, but the feedback that we give young people, and the feedback that I received as a young person, was so important that it allowed me to write more solidly once I was putting things out that actually at the university level or writing to submit to things. At the same time, one of the worst bits of feedback I ever received was on one of the first contests I ever decided to enter a couple of years ago. And I wrote a story where the protagonist, I didn't use pronouns at all. So no use of she, no use of they, no use of them. Because that was part of how I built the story. And at the end, I wrap it up, and the feedback I got was the character needs to get over himself.
What?
Yeah. And I think I did reveal the assignment at birth gender of the character at the end, but 2 of the 4 judges left that kind of really shitty comment. And I just said, screw it, I'm not continuing with this contest for the follow-up weeks. So yeah, that's
So first bad news.
yeah. On the other hand, when we're bouncing, reading off each other, one of the constant jokes we have is me and commas.
Oh, yes. Yeah. And Talia and I, we agree on things of such deep, right, such depth, right, about all kinds, like political viewpoints, about identity, blah, blah, blah. But what's going to end us is comma placement. That will end us.
I have that in my group too. Christine Catherine Rush, her famous comment is always, punctuation is personal. And she has exercises. Well, she'll give out a totally no punctuation passage from like a famous writer from Stephen King, and your assignment is to punctuate it. And everyone will punctuate it differently. And her answer, and so you're sort of waiting, well, who got it right? And she'll say, punctuation is personal, everything is right. Anyway, that was an aside. So my first feedback, I started writing, and I'd written, I probably spent 3 months on the first, 2,000 words in a story, and just rewriting it and fixing it and tweaking it. And I was at Word on the Street in Toronto, and I was talking to a lady writer, and she wrote genre fiction as well. And we started talking, and she said, well, I'm in a writing group, a critique group. We're looking for a member if you're interested. I thought, oh, that's great. And she said, okay, well, you'll have to submit something. So that meant I actually had to finish my first short story. And that's where I got my first feedback. And I don't know if you'll get into this, Costi, but critique groups can be incredibly valuable. They can also be incredibly damaging to a beginning writer too. If you get some egos involved and the people there are more interested in pulling you down as opposed to helping each other get our stories better. I was lucky. I got into a really, really good group. We had a wide variety. It was a pretty big group at that point. I think 7 people. And we met, and everybody was submitting at that time. So you got very efficient in a meeting if you're trying to get through 4 or 5 submissions in one evening. We had our rules. We formalized the rules, and I would not have sold anything, I don't think, if I didn't have that sort of early feedback. I certainly wouldn't have sold as early as I did.
So is that group still?
It's still there. We have, well, there's me and 2 of the originals, so there's 3 of us now, but and that's 20 years. We just added another writer, and we'll probably add more too, as we said, to get back into it.
20 years, that's a lifetime. I'm in the Stopwatch Gang critique groups. My primary is in the group as well. It's at the end of the room. We just formed, I think, 5 years ago or something like that. And yeah. And we were 5 in the beginning, then now we are about 8. And it's very important indeed to find people who can give you the right sort of feedback on the right tone and with the right words, because otherwise it can be damaging indeed. My first experience was in high school, in the 9th grade, and I just got into a writers group who had from big names to no names like me, and I just had one. My first story was a very, very short story, 1,000 words or something like that, and one of the big names started saying very nice words, and I was like in heaven. And then another big name started, no, he doesn't know what he's saying, he doesn't. And I'm like, okay, no, who am I listening? But in the end, it was good for me. I felt it wasn't good for me, but I felt good because 2 big names just saw me, just noticed me for the first time, and I was a nobody. So I was lucky that they were not just some guys who punched me. Yeah. So
one quick addition. I just remembered, like back then, you'd print out your manuscript and you'd hand out. You have to show up at a meeting, and you'd hand out everybody in the group right now have a physical copy, and then next time you met, they give you the critique on it. Now we just email it. I remember getting my pile back, and the very first one, Sandra Costuri, if you know Sandra from Cheesy, so she was in the group then. And the very first thing I ever saw in my very first story was she'd circled my title in red, and out at the side she'd put, yuck. I changed the title. I still kid her about it. So
she didn't read the whole thing?
No, she read the whole thing.
Oh.
That's the first comment I ever saw from the group on my writing.
So you've all gave feedback as well. So what's your feedback method? What's your formula?
Well, I think what as an editor, what I like to do is establish right from the beginning with my clients, my authors, that I am on team them, right? So I want their story to be good. And if I give suggestions, I want to do it in their voice, right? So I don't want to kind of impose my way of writing something, but just enhance what they've already done. So when I kind of set that tone, so fair, so good. I have 2 of my clients here. Please just say nice things. But when I set that tone, I think they know, okay, we're not going to have a battle. I'm just going to do my job for them. And really, it's their decision in the end. So I think for me, just creating that atmosphere is the first thing that I do. And then I got to do all the yucky stuff like no, you can't use and like too many times, or you can't blah blah. But I never, when there's problems, I like to state them. No offense to Sandra, I won't go say yuck. I might say it, but I won't write it. But I do state the problems, but I try to state them in a way that explains why I think it's problematic. And where I can, I like to say, how about this? Suggestion, what about that? And so I feel that there's kind of like this two-way communication, even as I write my notes in the margin and that. So I'm all about kind of the respect and stuff, and I find that my writers are very respectful in return, and so we have this kind of collaborative thing. Is that right? Yes, that's right. Okay.
You're awesome.
Yeah, so that's my method. Really.
But you're talking as an editor.
But I'm
as
also
opposed
an
to-
author, you see?
Okay.
So I have the sensibility of being edited as well. So it's almost like I have this do unto others sort of thing. As a writer, I love being edited because after a while you just cannot perceive your own writing anymore. You see what you think is there, but not necessarily what's there, right? So yeah, like I've been treated very well by editors in the sense, when I say well, they've given me useful information, right? So even when something didn't work and it was pointed out, that was useful information for me, and they made me better. And so as an editor, I also want to help people be the best that they can be. That's very army sounding.
Sorry, what was that question?
So what's your method of giving feedback?
Okay. When I'm providing feedback, and oftentimes it's around some of the sensitivity areas that I edit for, or back and forth is when I go through, say, a novel that I'm sensitivity editing, I look for problematic tropes, etc., around really the various issues. And sometimes I'll give comments in the text. And then what I usually like to do is provide a summary of what it is, and not just saying, "Oh, this is bad, don't do it," but this is how to make it stronger. And no, just don't even go there for some types of things. I have occasionally read things where my first response internally, it doesn't get fed back in these words, is burn it with fire. Or your cis allo white dude is showing.
Oh, I have to take a break now.
For certain types of writing, which are just completely tone deaf and just don't grasp what they're trying to write. And this is particularly common when we're dealing with queer topics, with disability, with mental health, etc. And I try to be kind, I'm always trying to be constructive, and sometimes the answer is just start that section over. And I'm not afraid to say it either. I think far too often, particularly when we get friends reading things, is that it's easy to say, I like it because it's a friend and I don't want to necessarily offend the person, and it's moving beyond that when I'm providing feedback for writing.
Yeah, I think that's important. I mean, how I provide feedback is kind of the general guidelines we use in the group. You do try to find something positive to say about the story, even if, to Talia's point, your end recommendation might be that, the story in this version of the manuscript doesn't work, you got to start again, just blank screen, blank sheet of paper, start over. But we do try to say something good about this story. But we're all...
Sorry.
Sorry?
Like it is written, so that's something.
You got to the end.
Yeah.
And I try not to make flippant remarks like I just did, because, you know, a lot of the critiques, there's always the danger of, you know, trying to be funny as you're giving your criticisms. We don't do that. We're all there for the same reason. We are trying to, you know, sell our work, or already are and want to sell more work. And we want to make the story better, and we're all there to help the other person make their story better. So we do have some guidelines. Yeah, say something positive, but then tell me what doesn't work. So what works, what doesn't work. I'm more interested in knowing what doesn't work. We recognize that it's that author's story. It's like when I'm giving a critique, it's not my story. So we do emphasize focusing on, tell me as a wise reader what works for you in this. Are there pacing problems? Is the character's motivation understandable? Is the character consistent in terms of the choices they make through the story? Whatever. One thing we try not to do, and once the author asks for it, is how to fix it. We don't, like I might say, what the pacing in this section, these 3 scenes, just grinds to a halt. It's just really, really slow. And, you know, too much talking here, info dump here, whatever. But I won't say how to fix it. Often at the end of the night, you know, the author may say, okay, look, I rewrote that section 5 times and it's still not working. Has anybody got an idea how I can do to fix it? You know, get better. But our kind of rule is, it's your story. I'll tell you how it impacted me and what I felt was good and what didn't work in it. But it's really up to you to go back and fix it. And it's not that we don't want to give them that. It's more an understanding that you're the writer. We're all writers. We're telling you whether it worked or not, and you've got to fix the manuscript. Right?
Yeah, so I think these are the set of rules that we can all respect, and also we can add to that if you have a critique like this section doesn't work, or this character doesn't work, you have to explain yourself. You don't just
say that.
Yeah, you don't just. You have to explain why. Yeah, and that in a certain depth. Yeah, not just in 2 words, and that's very important because you can't just. I mean, I just hated it. Oh, I didn't like the story. Why? I just didn't like it.
Yeah.
How's that? I mean, you know, you can't do something like that.
It's got to be an actionable. Like you've got to point to a specific problem that they can then address.
Yes.
And I would add to that, if one is reviewing something that isn't a genre that one normally reads, there is a certain acknowledgement that goes, okay, this isn't my thing on a personal level, but I can still read it to see if the story is decent and everything else, even if it's not a type of book or short story that I would necessarily go out and buy in the bookstore.
Yeah, exactly. And if any of us have any, you know, hot buttons, like things that just kind of turn us off, well, by now we all know that what we have. But that's another thing you should make aware, because the story may turn you off because it hits one of your hot buttons, and maybe a totally workable story.
All right. Yeah, thank you. And you touched on the critiquing groups, so not just the editing part, but also if you are part of a writers group, and I think that's important in the career of a writer.
Yes.
At all stages, but especially in the beginning. But there are 2 types of writing groups, like the short story writing group and the novel writing group. So what are the differences? Are you part of any writers group?
Yes, absolutely, yeah. I'm part of a writers group. Actually, Talia is also part of the same writers group. It's called the Inconceivables.
Oh.
And it's interesting that you said, you know, there's writers groups for short stories and such. We're a little bit of everything. So we have kind of we try to do a suggested word limit to read. Like we kind of read our stuff out loud. That's just how we do it. And so sometimes Talia's read poetry. I've read short stories. Sometimes I've read excerpts from my novel and that. And so we do it because a lot of us have various forms of disabilities. We do it actually through Google Hangout. That's what we're doing, right?
Yeah, although we're switching formats, but yeah.
So that's what we do, and so we'll read our pieces out loud, and even though we get along, we could say like, hey, this is the great way I reacted to it, but we can also say, you know, you might want to focus on this a little more. You know, there might be a little bit too much repetition here, or I'm hearing you say the name of the character a little too often, maybe kind of restructure that. So it's really good because we're all hungry for feedback. And we aren't just going to kind of stroke each other's hand through it. Oh, you're good, you're wonderful, you're love. Well, maybe sometimes we do that. But yeah, we're hungry for the feedback, and so we're very receptive to get it. And I think we have this understanding of it's going to be delivered. Like the stuff that we feel doesn't work is going to be said, so we're expecting it. So I don't know the difference, say, between a group that's only focused for short stories or only for novels, because we do a little bit of everything.
But for instance, when you say novel, do they read the entire one or just the excerpt?
Excerpts, right? And so
not the entire novel, and then give you a feedback for the whole
yeah,
thing?
yeah. So a lot of times we read works in progress.
Right.
That's kind of the way how we do that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it's like, okay, today I'm going to be reading, you know, chapter 3 of my book, and I personally find it kind of fun because then I can't wait till next week to see what chapter 4 is going to be like and such. And I like hearing like if Talia is going to start reading a poem, it's like, okay, I've been listening to a story, now I get to listen to something different, and it takes your brain into a different place too. And there's a different kind of rhythm and feel to poetry as well. So I just personally like the variety. And I feel that knowing that group is out there gives me confidence because you know you're going to get some developmental feedback, and it's kind of nice, right?
Yeah, that's the main thing I'm looking for too.
Yeah.
Well, you'll get typos and
Yes,
line
exactly.
edits too, but you're basically looking for the substantive content.
Mm-hmm.
So our group does both, and we have from the start. So there'd be our early members. We had novel writers, we had short story writers, and we had the similar thing. You had so many words that you were kind of allowed to put in, especially when we were a big group, and sequencing rules about 5 stories in. Well, we're doing the first 4 because that's all we can do. So lately, though, like I've been the one who's been the most productive, and I was working on a novel. And the way I work on a novel was sort of what I call headlights on the highway. I kind of write as far as I can see down the road. So I'll be submitting 3, 4, or 5 chapters at a time. So they've been getting chunks of like 10,000, 12,000 words, and we just do that.
At what pace? I mean, every week or
No,
every once in a while?
every month at that pace. So
Okay.
we do 4 chapters.
So you have to like a summary of what happened before, so to remind them?
No,
No?
unless they have very short memories, or I've been writing very poorly and they couldn't actually remember who these characters were. That's another sign you have a problem. But then I'm not looking for any sort of detailed editing. I'm looking for, give me the high level substantive. Is the story working? Are the characters working? Are you still engaged? Is the pacing okay, et cetera, et cetera. So we've edited everything, and at the same time, well, people put in, 3,000 word short stories that we're doing. So that's how we've done it in the past. Somebody would be showing up with a chapter for the novel. So me, I just tended to do chunks and brought it to them that way.
Chunky chapters.
Yeah, chunks of chapters, because if I did it chapter by chapter, I'd have to kind of finish the whole book or an act and submit it that way. But I think it's whatever works, and we just...
And did it happen sometimes that you were stuck somewhere, or anybody in the group, and you gave the outline, of the story, and said, oh, I don't know how to get from here to here, so no.
That's my job. Sometimes I'll ask, like at the end of a night, if everyone's come up with, the ending sucks, for a short story, and I'll say, well, I actually have no idea, because I've got this problem, I don't know how to resolve it. If you ask for feedback, that's allowed. They can give you some ideas how to fix your story. And the outline, I'm not going to give an outline because I don't have an outline. I don't write that way. I write the next 4 or 5 chapters at a time.
All right. So do you have any recommendations about how to form a writer's group, or what should they look?
I think for me, the first thing that I would look for are people who aren't afraid to give you feedback. And it can be friends who are writers. It can, as long as they have that sensibility that they're going to tell you stuff, right? Because it really has no use to be this kind of happy rainbow club and all that. Actually, that sounds fun. I'm going to erase that. I think I'd like to form a happy rainbow writing club. But
With unicorns.
with unicorns, exactly, right? Yeah, so the first thing is to find yourself a collection of people who really believe in giving constructive feedback, you know, and you kind of like have that pact with each other, you know, like it's almost like I won't let you fail, or they have your back, you know. If something just kind of doesn't work, I'm gonna say it. It's like the lettuce in your teeth kind of thing. Those are, I think that would be the first thing. And then I would say, again, person lives with a disability, or I am disabled, per se that. Being a disabled person, having to go out of my house to a writer's group doesn't work for me. So finding people who are in my situation as well, and taking advantage of technology and finding ways to think out of the box of how are we going to do this writers group, right? I think again, so not only finding people who give the feedback, but finding people who kind of understand kind of how your life works, have maybe lived their lives in a similar way. I really do find the online thing works for us. So maybe open your mind to different ways of doing it. But yeah, like just be honest with yourself of how much you can commit, the way you can commit, and the type of people that will give you feedback. That's me.
For me, one of the most important things in finding a writers group is one that is actually not going to be crappy around queer, trans, disabled writing. Because it's still rampant, where when we write own voices work, we get shut down. You know, mainstream publishers, for example, will have the one token gay book in their publishing calendar for the year. And making sure to find people for the group who are on a similar mindset for the type of writing one is doing, and are receptive to the ideas that would be portrayed in that, even if that's not what they're writing themselves. You know, in my work in progress, part of it is around theocracy, and I wrote this one scene and shared it with the group, and your reaction was?
It's so good, I effing hate it, right? Because Talia touched on a lived experience of mine in a certain right-wing kind of church culture that I left. And so I kept saying, I want to blurb your book. It's so good, I effing hate it.
Right, so that's finding that ability to be honest with the group when stuff isn't working, but not saying, no, what you're writing is nasty, evil, it shouldn't be done.
Yeah, exactly.
Constructive but respectful of
Yeah.
what you're trying to tell. So yeah, the core problem, I think, is how do you find, so good points. So we have an idea what the ideal group would be, so how do you find them? I know in the past, a lot of other writing groups have sort of come out of the kernel of people who've gone to a writing workshop, mostly on the craft side, like a creative workshop together. If you take something not online, or maybe even online if you're communicating with other people, you get a feel of what the other writers are like, and whether you might mesh with them, styles of writing, emotionally, ability to take feedback, etc. So that's one way. I don't really know. We're talking writing groups versus finding beta readers. I think we're going to talk about that later.
Yeah.
So go to conferences like this too. I mean, if you're in this room, you're writers or wannabe writers, or see who's there and strike up conversations. And if you're from the same community, maybe you can talk about starting your own writing group. Personalities play a big key. I mean, I've said, we've got the core group for 20 years. Some people have left, one passed away tragically. Some people have come in and we have suggested to them that perhaps we're not a good fit for them. And it all comes down to the way they give critiques and the way they take critiques. We've had both kinds. Some that just didn't like being told that their story wasn't perfect, and other ones that could not give constructive criticism without being demeaning. So my opening comment was a writing group can be the best thing for your writing career. It can also be very destructive if you get the wrong group of personalities and you're sort of a fragile beginning writer. So conferences and writing workshops, there's an upside. If you go to any of those, try to come away, if you're looking for a writing group, try to come away with some conversations with other attendees about the potential writing group. Yeah.
And I would add to that, part of my background is mental health, is it might be a good group, but it might not be a good group, a good fit for one as an individual. So it's okay if it's not a good mesh. There's another group out there that will work.
I just wanted to make a suggestion. My social group and some of my beta readers came out of NaNoWriMo, like going to the in-person events and meeting people through NaNoWriMo. So that's another way to meet
that's
other
another way.
writers.
Very good.
So yeah, there's a distinction between writers groups and beta readers. Are they the same for you, or do you feel like you need beta readers who are out of your group?
It depends. First of all, I love beta readers. I can't live without my beta readers. I think, for the way the writers group I'm in works, it's a little more high level. So I have a work in progress, and I hear, okay, we're entertained, and okay, maybe look at this, and blah, blah, blah. So it's enough just to prompt me to keep going. But my beta readers are when I'm getting down to brass tacks. Like, it's like, okay, I really want your undivided attention on this manuscript. Tell me what works for you. Tell me what doesn't. And I take their feedback very, very seriously. And in my case, I'm an allo cishet woman who writes queer characters. So I choose representation in my beta reader group. So a lot of times they act like sensitivity readers to me as well, and which is invaluable. I can't even stress enough, right? So while I love my writers group to say, yeah, this is going, okay, tweak this, but keep going, the beta readers are the ones that, like, for me, they're almost like, I know a lot of people say beta readers are your first impression of people who read your book, but to me, they're also like my first editing team. They kind of have a dual function for me. So, yeah.
And you change them from book to book, or?
Yes, I have done. Yeah, I have done. Just the nature of the content to the book. Yeah.
For me, beta readers are definitely different from the writing group. For my poetry, often my beta readers are beta listeners because I've written it and I'm presenting it in a setting, literally finishing it a few hours before, particularly when I write poetry that fits with liturgy and services. Often the first time people hear it would be in the service. And I've been blown away by the responses because it's raw responses with poetry. For stories, again, like Cait said, I'm very similar in that I want to get some diversity in who's doing the reading. And in some ways, for me, a beta reader is also kind of like submitting it for the first time.
I agree.
Because that's when they'll come back and hopefully give the type of feedback that will say, yeah, I can really see this doing well, or no, I can't see it doing well for these reasons. And if the reason that I get back is I don't see it doing well because it's too queer, I'm going to say, yeah, thanks, but no thanks. Go away. If it's, it's not going to do well because you've made 5,000 errors in your first page, well, or first chapter, that's a different story.
Yeah.
So to me, there's that element as well, is that it is almost like submitting if they're being honest
Yeah.
with the feedback.
Totally agree. So for me, my writing group are my alpha readers. Right? They're the ones who are seeing it first. When I send, and I have a mailing list, which you're welcome to sign up for. I give a free ebook every month. I choose, and I have a subset of my mailing list, which are basically my super fans. So one of the perks of being one of my VIP subscribers is you get to be a beta reader. Like I make it, you get to do work for free. This is a good thing. Aren't you lucky? So I recently did this for the first book. I'm writing a trilogy. I've done the second book. So they are doing all my work for me on my first book. And I basically put it out there. And that was the first time I'd used them as trying to find a group of beta readers, like being sort of beyond my critique group. And I was kind of blown away by the number of people who put up their hand. And the number of people who basically, it was like a job application. Like, you know, they gave me their resume for why they'd be a great beta reader. Okay, you convinced me. So, they are due to give me the feedback next week. So it will be the first time I've gone through that formal process. And I gave them, the other thing, I don't have the website, but there's a great resource I came across for basically being a good beta reader. So I just sent them that resource and gives them sort of the type of feedback you want. I told you, I don't want line edits. I want a substantive content type of edit. What works for you, what doesn't work for you as a reader. You're not a writer. I expect you to just be giving me your reactions as a reader and break it down sort of by acts.
So it's the first time you're using the system?
First time I'm using that. I've done that with other people I've sort of handpicked, mostly because they've been editors and friends, so I've used them as beta readers for that. I've taken a different readers.
Nice. So we have like 5 more minutes. Do you have any questions? Yes.
Question really is around how can one deliver critique so that it isn't perceived as criticism, particularly if it's somebody. Well, yes, particularly if it's somebody who's close to a spouse or a family member. I know that when I look at something, I read a book, I watch a film. There's a part of me that is just enjoying the experience, but there's a part of me that is always very analytical, who notices continuity lapses or timing errors and these things. So if I'm looking at something that somebody's given me to critique, I can't help but point out there's no way that the timing of that would work, or this isn't pre-indicated in something, and how do I convey these things without saying this is terrible?
Well, you don't say that. So I'll use your own example. You talk about watching a film and you're enjoying it. So start with that. Talk about what you enjoyed in the story. So again, start with something positive. And the other thing is you always talk about the manuscript. You don't talk about the writer,
Yes.
right? So to an extent possible, don't say you did this. It just said, in the story here where Arthur does this, I don't see it because prior you set up their motivation as being this, and this seems very inconsistent. And deliver it that way. If they're a professional writer and you're pointing out something that is true, and you're doing it in a respectful manner.
I just found the way you spoke right now, I was thinking, wow, he would deliver very well. Because you just explained to us, that, I'm seeing these little, not inconsistency, but what did you say? It was, you said something good. But you were just communicating it very naturally to us. And I thought, well, do that thing, and people will be receptive.
Problem being people versus someone who is close to you, as for example, a spouse or family member.
Right, yeah, I can't help you there.
He's also in our group.
But one of the ways that I like to do it is again, start with the positive, talk about the problems, whatever they might be. And then close with positives.
It's like a positive sandwich.
Yeah.
It's an old sandwich, like delivering criticism.
Yeah, and some encouragement that it can be made better, or if the story is one that, as I said earlier, that just doesn't work, be positive, make the critiques and say, as it is right now, I don't see it working, but I know you can make it work. Or I know that you may need to shelve it and come back to it.
But you know what? It triggered off a funk in my head. I think the first thing you need to know, say if it is with a spouse or someone like very close to you, is say, I'd love to critique your work. Now, would that work for you if I, because I'm gonna not always say it's perfect. Like, are you okay if I tell you that it's not okay in some places or something doesn't work for you? Like, are you receptive? And if they say,